interact with these broadcasts is to follow the link and join on HAPS, but it will be going out on some other things as well where you can see it, but all the comments get integrated here, so it works a bit better that way. Anyway, what we're talking about today is just one of the ways that we look for moths and do some surveys here, a rather traditional method that we use. And the story behind this method, which is referred to as sugaring or entomological sugar, is that back in the 19th century, a bunch of entomologists were gathered at their local pub preparing to go out in the evening and look for moths in the local site, and they were having a nice drink to just get ready for it, which I always think is a good civilized way to start an evening. And they noticed in the garden of the pub, or on the outside of the pub, there were some old beer barrels which had been put down, been left, the beer had been finished, the barrels had been left, they were open, and they noticed that various insects, moths and so on, were coming to the beer barrels and feeding on this sticky beer secretions inside. So this got them thinking, well, that could be a way to go and find moths. We could go and do some surveying of that sort. We could make our own artificial stuff. So they developed the idea of creating what gets called sugar. And this is a sticky mixture of various ingredients that gets spread on trees. I made up a batch earlier today, so we'll go and have a quick look at what the ingredients were that we used to make this stuff. So we'll just turn the camera around and we'll go and wander through into our kitchen here. This is as close to a cooking broadcast as I will ever do. Hello, Isa. So making entomological sugar is one of the ways we serve it for moths, and this is the ingredients. I've already, cooking for insects rather than cooking insects. So for those who don't know, Isa does a broadcast here on HAPS called The Bug Scope. Well worth watching, well worth following. And Isa did something recently about eating insects, which was really interesting. So go back to her, when this is finished, go back to her broadcast and find that one and watch that one. But this is one of the things we do to look for insects, and we make this entomological sugar. And it all starts with beer. So you get a bottle of beer. This one's been opened. It's you get the cheapest beer you can find. This is one of my local supermarkets' own brands, because you're not going to drink it. You don't care what it tastes like. The moths have no taste whatsoever in the quality of beer. So you get the cheapest beer you can. You open that up, you pour it into your big pot here, and then you add some dark sugar. This is some dark brown sugar. Yes, which we'll do. It'd be good to be able to retweet HAPS. It's something we need to get them to add, I think. There's a few features I'd like them to put onto HAPS, but that we're going to. Anyway, you add about 1 kilogram of dark brown sugar. I did all this earlier, so this is hypothetical, but you pour this in, you're boiling the beer up, you pour the sugar in, and then you add some black treacle, which again is another sugar product, and you pour that in, and you boil all of that up until it forms a black sticky liquid, which is what's in here. I will briefly open it up and show you what it looks like. This will have vacuum sealed because I put it away hot. There we go. So what you get is this black, sugary, gunky liquid. Probably shouldn't have done that. Now my finger's absolutely filthy. With a bit of a skin on the top. Smells really sweet. I'm going to have to wash my hands now. We'll just keep that pointed there. And that stuff is what you're going to spread on the trees. And you can do it just like that. You can just put that out, but often people add another ingredient to it. And you can add another household ingredient. So often people add a little dash of rum. Again, use the cheapest rum you can find. The moths do not enjoy the taste. That's not, well, perhaps they do enjoy the taste, but they're not discerning. Somebody gave me this bottle of old cheap white rum to use. Brown rum, dark rum would be better, but use that. So that's something you can add. Again, it just adds a bit of extra sort of smell and scent to it, which makes it more attractive to the insects. Or the alternative, these have all been household ingredients. The alternative that you can add, and this is something you probably don't have in your average domestic kitchen, is a chemical called amyl acetate. You might remember this from school chemistry lessons. This is the stuff that smells a bit like pear drops. It's a solvent. And you put a few drops of that in, and again, that scent adds to the flavour, adds to the scent, and hopefully makes it more attractive to the moths. So that's what I've used today, was a little bit of this amyl acetate. I have no intention of pronouncing the German word under there, which I suspect is amyl acetate in German. But you can add a bit of that. And I mean, that bottle I've had and I've been using for this for about 15 years. And as you can see, there's still quite a bit left. So you don't use much of it. It's a fairly harmless chemical. It is flammable. If you poured it on flame, it would burst into flame. So don't do that. But it's a fairly innocuous chemical. It's not something you need to worry about very seriously. So that produces the entomological sugar. And then what you go and do, which I did earlier, is you go and smear that on trees and go and have a look and see if you can find any moths. So just before we do that, I'll talk a little bit about the types of moths that we might... Oops, what's it doing? Hang on. The type of moths that you might get at this sugar. So theoretically, any of the moths that feed as adults, that drink nectars and liquids and sugary liquids as adults, could come to this, but we tend to find that it's moths in the Noctuidae mainly that come to entomological sugar. And I'll show you pictures of a few of the ones that we might get tonight. And then we'll go out. I haven't been around and checked these. When I'm doing these broadcasts, cheat by going out in advance and checking if there's something there to show you. I haven't done that today, so it'll be complete mystery whether this is working or not tonight. It can be a bit hit and miss as a method, but we'll give it a go. But the sort of things we could look for, just turn the camera around and have a look into one of the field guides here. If you're in the United Kingdom and you're at all interested in moths, this is the book to get. This is well worth having. It's a really nice book. It shows the moths in their natural resting postures, gives you a bit of information on them. Trying to do all this one-handed whilst holding a camera is remarkably difficult. I don't know how people who do these broadcasts professionally manage it. But up here we've got a couple of the species that we get quite often. These are probably the two I get most commonly at sugar. The copper underwing and the Svensson's copper underwing, very similar moths. And the main way to tell these apart from dissection and looking at their genitalia, is to look at the undersides of the hindwing, here and here. That's the main way of telling them apart, and you look at the extent of the copper. So even if we find these out in the field, I'll not be able to tell you which one it is tonight, but we'll have a go. And also this moth, larger moth, called the old lady, or Momo maura, is also quite common at sugar. It's called an old lady because they think it looks like a large dark cloak, which apparently old ladies wear. I think some of these early entomologists had very strange ideas, and some of them certainly had some very strange ideas about what women get up to. But that's a subject for a different conversation. And the other group that we don't see as often as I'd like, but I'd really like to, are the red underwings, the Catocala genus particularly. This is the commonest one, red underwing, but there are others that are somewhat similar but have some reasonably different markings, and some of these have started to be more common. And since it's on the same page, somebody not far away from me had one of these, oak yellow underwing, which is hardly ever recorded in the UK, but somebody had one earlier in the year. No chance at all we'll get one of them, but it's always nice to look at the pictures. And then the real star species that I've never seen and I really want to see is the Clifton nonpareil. You have Noctua pronuba, that's large yellow underwing, isn't it? Yeah, we have that here as well. Let me find out. So we have that as well. That's invasive from Europe. Yeah, it's super common here. It's one of the commonest moths we get in the trap, and it's very active in the light trap. So there's the vernacular name of Noxia pronuba, which he says talking about, is large yellow underwing, but frequently the mothers call it, the Lepidopterus, we call it the blunderwing because it blunders and bashes around the trap. Anyway, this, if I can find this, I will be very excited tonight because I've never seen one. It was viewed as one of those holy grails of the mothing world. If you could find a Clivdendon perile, Catocala fraxini with its blue underwing, that was really exciting. And it's becoming a little bit more common. I've got more chance. Right, I'm going to take a wander out into the woods now and see what we can see. So we've got a bit of balancing of things. The broadcast will get very choppy for a moment and very pixelated as I walk off the Wi-Fi and it connects onto my cellular data. So just bear with me if I appear to turn into a small bunch of pixels that sounds like a robot. It will restart soon. It's one of the things that HAPS does quite nicely is handles dropping signal, which Periscope, which I used to use, never did a good job of. Have to lock up here as well, just for security. It's a reasonably secure site, but I do always lock the building before going out. Right. Should reconnect. So hopefully the signal has come back now and you can possibly see a beam of torchlight dancing in front of me. I suspect you need pretty specialist equipment to do a lot of outdoor broadcasting after dark. But so just wandering up into Perivale Wood here, we'll have a very quick glance at one of the moth traps that I put out. Don't know if you can hear. I can hear several dark bush crickets chirping from the bushes around me. Don't know if they are coming across on the broadcast. They're a dark bush cricket, we call them. Or you can hear it, excellent. Or Americans call this group, the vernacular name in America for this group is the katydids. It's dark bush cricket. I doubt very much I'll be able to find one. They're remarkable how they can shout this loud. I mean, they're pretty loud where I am anyway. And yet, you can never find one. Yeah. Well, if we see one on the trees or something, I'll point it out a bit later. And yes, here's one of my moth traps. This is one of the ones with blue actinic light. This one's actually on loan from my friends at the Amateur Entomologist Society. So thanks to them for allowing us here at Perivale Wood to look after this trap and make use of it. And there is a moth flying into it. Flying madly around it. Quite a large moth. I suspect it was one of the tigers, possibly Jersey tiger. Well, the point of the traps is you leave them and come back in the morning and see what's there. An unwelcome moth on the top here. So this is, the vernacular name is gypsy moth, although I know some people are saying we should not call it that anymore. And this is a species that was native to Britain. It lived in the East Anglian fens, but it went extinct in Britain and has now recolonised the country. And it can be rather a pest species, certainly for commercial forestry, in very large numbers. This is a male. The females are much bigger, are whiter, have a more interesting zigzaggy pattern, much flappier wings, but they tend not to fly as strongly. And yes, very feathered antennae. I think they are a species that can scent the female, can smell the females with their antennae from a long way away. And there are synthetic pheromone lures for these. Anyway, we weren't going to look at the trap, we were going to look at some of the sugar runs and see if anything's come to any of the sugar I've put out. So we'll go a bit further into the wood. It always feels weird when I'm doing these broadcasts on insects that I'm not carrying a net, because I'm bound to see something and want to net it. At a female hatch. Oh yes, I've reared gypsy moth through before, because when I first found them, first time I found one, I found a female sitting on a tree, so I thought I'll take that. Took her, she laid some eggs, and I've reared them through from eggs all the way through. And they're quite interesting. I'll quite often find the cocoons, the pupa, sitting on trees as well. So this is the first tree I've put some sugar on. We'll go and have a look and see what's here. Yes, I've got it. And it's not been very successful. Let me have a look. Well, here is some sugar on the tree, so that's a start. Have I got any moths visiting it? No, that's rather unhelpful. Problem with doing these things live? The wildlife does not always behave. We'll wander on and check another one. Yeah, couple of years ago, I was wandering around this reserve, and I found, I saw a female of the gypsy moth sitting in a tree, on the trunk of a tree, looking rather oddly positioned. And then I noticed it had been got by one of the false widow spiders. And this spider was sitting there with its fangs in, drinking the innards of this moth, as the spiders do. Which I thought, well, that's interesting enough. So I took a picture of it, thought do that, trying to identify the spider as well, because I'm less good with spiders. And thought no more of it. And then about half an hour later, I was walking past again, and the dead female, being eaten by a spider, had attracted a male which was mating with it. So yes, that was rather an odd thing to find. So even after they're dead, obviously the pheromones are still being pumped out. The male finds the pheromones, finds the female there, and thinks, I'll have a go, see how it works. Clearly, well, I would assume there was no way that it managed to successfully fertilise the eggs, or that the female could possibly have let the fertile eggs out, so it would have been unsuccessful. But I thought that was rather an interesting observation. Right, now which tree am I looking for now? Is it this one? Ah, yes. We're not having a lot of success. This is looking very unsuccessful again. It is always annoying. I have had success with this method, but it is very hit and miss, and I've not really worked out what the conditions are. But more entomological sugar. So we'll wander on and check one more, and then we'll call it a day. So if anybody joining just now, what we're doing is we're having a look around here in Perivale Wood for moths at what's called entomological sugar, which is a mixture of beer and sugar, and in this case a bit of something called amyl acetate, to create something that is sticky and sweet and that attracts, with any luck, moths and insects to come and feed on it and allow us to look for them. We've not actually had much luck as yet finding any, but you've got to try. And of course, that's the perils of real live wildlife broadcasting. you can't always trust the wildlife to do what you're telling it. Oops. Yes, not a lot to see other than a torch beam dancing at the moment. Oh, here's a moth on the fence. Where is it going? One of the Geometridae moths flying about. Wouldn't like to say what species it was, because I didn't see it well. Now, which tree did I put more sugar on? So we'll check one more tree, see how it's going. It's going as the other ones went by the looks of things. There is, however, a different bush cricket here. Yeah, I suspect just coincidentally, I don't think bush crickets feed on sticky stuff, although I don't actually know much about them. Orthopterans aren't really a group I know a lot about. But this is the speckled bush cricket. You might be able to see it's got speckles on it. I suspect that's pushing what can be done with this light. And it's a female. Oops, there we go. We come round this way. You can possibly see off the back of her abdomen. It's hard to make out, but she's got a large, prominent ovipositor. And it has got a bunch of speckles on its body. And I'm drifting off. And the shape of the body, this sort of slightly hunched up shape, is fairly typical. So I can know what that one is. And the antennae are really impressively large here. The antennae are probably about, maybe we're getting about twice the length of the body. Oops, not if you can't, no, if I'm not pointing at her, they're not. So the antennae are pretty large as well. As far as I can tell, though, that is probably just coincidentally there. Unless, I don't know. He said, do you know what katydids feed on? What their food source is? I doubt it's taking the sugary liquid. I suspect it's just here by chance. Anyway, that's probably about as good a place as any to end on. Leaves, but sometimes predatory. So yeah, just a coincidence that it's here. Unless it's waiting around in ambush for anything. So we'll end on that. Unfortunately, no moths came to sugar after all that making it. Could be. I don't know. I might have to see if I can find an orthopteran expert and ask them if they know about it. But there we go. At least an insect to end on. And I will probably sometime over the weekend do a broadcast of some of the moths that come to the moth traps that I've got out as well. But that will not be, I probably won't do that live in the morning. It's just a bit impractical to go through the traps and do this. So I'll do that after the fact and talk about some of the things we've got. So good evening, have a good day wherever you are.